So we'll get started, and if others join us, then they can jump in. Thank you all so much for joining us today. My name is Christina Diaversa. I'm the Associate Director of Housing Services at Lehigh, and I'm joined today by Chelsea, and I'll let her introduce in a minute. And we're going to talk to you guys about living at Lehigh, how to find and build an inclusive community for yourselves and for others.
Thanks, Chris. So, hi, I'm Chelsea Gilbert. I use she, her pronouns. I work as the director of the Pride Center here at Lehigh. And before I jump in, I just wanted to share our results here. So it looks like of the folks who are joining us live and in person, we've got 2 outside the U.S., 2 in the more immediate area near Lehigh, Pennsylvania, or New Jersey, and someone from the Northeast. So good to have you all. We did also want to let you know that we are recording this session because it was put together with not a whole lot of advance time for folks to block their schedules to attend. We want to make sure the information can get to everyone. So we wanted to share that, but also let you know that we'll be sharing it in such a way that your names and information will not be visible to folks who are attending. So yeah, we'll jump in and tell you a little bit about our plan. So I'm going to give you a brief overview of the Pride Center first, and then Chris is going to review housing and housing services and the roommate matching process. We'll go over a couple of frequently asked questions, and then there will be time for open Q&A. So even though we've got that time blocked at the very end of our webinar for the open Q&A, feel free to use the Q&A function at any point, and we'll try our best to respond to those as we can, as we're also sharing the information that we have for you, or we'll get to them at the end. So with that, I will share with you just a little bit about the Pride Center. I'll do a really brief overview. So the Pride Center has been around since 2014 at Lehigh, and it's grown quite a bit since that time. So it went from being a tiny little room called the Rainbow Room to being the flourishing and thriving center that we have today. And our mission really is to create a more just and equitable campus and world where everyone, regardless of their gender and regardless of their sexuality, can bring their full and authentic selves to all aspects of their Lehigh experience. So we really are here as a resource for all students, not just for those who identify as LGBTQ+. And we do our work in a number of different ways. And I'm one member of the Pride Center team. We also have 2 other amazing staff members, Scott and Mel, as well as a team of graduate and undergraduate student staff on any given semester. So when you're here at Lehigh, hopefully you'll get to meet all of our incredible staff members who really make our work possible. So I want to first share a little bit about and there's our mission there, so you can see it. I want to first share a little bit about our community building efforts. That's one big part of what we do in the Pride Center, is build community amongst students, graduate, undergraduate, faculty, and staff members. So some of the ways we do that are through our peer-led support spaces. Those are support spaces that are closed based on identity, and we have 5. They include spaces for LGBT students of color, for bisexual and pansexual students, for students in the coming out process, as well as trans students and ACE students. So those are spaces where students can come and find support from like-minded individuals. We also have more traditional student organizations. Spectrum is our biggest one. They host an annual drag show every year, as well as lots of great programming. And then we also have a mentorship program where you get matched with an undergraduate, upper class student, as well as a graduate student and a faculty and staff member. So all of those are some of the ways that we build community at Lehigh. I do have a kind of a little quiz for you next in terms of kind of a fun fact. So I'll give you a second to answer it. The question is, what percentage of students involved in the Pride Center do you think identify as allies, as non-LGBTQ? Do you think it's 10%, 25%, 30%, or 50%? So it looks like we're kind of between 30 and 50 at this point. Somebody thinks it might just be 10%. Give it another second. Okay, so looks like most people think that it's 30%. Truthfully, it really depends on the semester, but the last time we checked these numbers, it was around 50%. So 50% of the students who engaged with the Pride Center identified as allies, and that meant that a lot of the students who are part of our organizations are there because this is something they really care about. We have two groups in particular, one called Greek Allies and one called Tide, where students can work to create a more inclusive environment in our Greek community and in our athletics community, and those tend to be really popular with allies as well as with next little bit of the Pride Center that I'm here to tell you about is our education and training. So we offer LU Ally to students, inclusive language, LGBT 101. We also have a peer group called Speak. They are undergraduate students who actually train their peers on some of those very same issues. And so as a Lehigh student, you would have the opportunity to join Speak. They actually are part of orientation every year, so you could get to know some of those students who go through a whole semester of training to be able to do what they do. So I have another quick poll for you, another quiz. And in this one, I want you to estimate how many faculty, staff, and students do you think are trained by the Pride Center each year? It could be 100, 500, 1,000, or 2,000. So I'll give you a minute to answer. Right now we're split between 500 and 1,000. More people think it's 1,000. Okay, so it looks like we're split between 500 and 1,000. It's actually over 1,000 people, students, faculty, and staff who we train in the Pride Center every year, and that includes some of the students who are trained by our peer educators. So we're really working hard to get that information out so that we can contribute to making a campus that really fulfills our mission, a campus where everybody can be their full and authentic self. So the final piece of work that the Pride Center does that kind of happens behind the scenes are our policy and practice advocacy. So those are the ways that we are working to really transform some of our systems here at Lehigh. One major one that we've been working on for several years has to do with names. So for many students, including those who are trans or non-binary, the name that they go by might be different from their legal name. And currently, we've been working really hard to make sure that all of Lehigh systems can accommodate a student's preferred or chosen name. And we're not 100% of the way there yet, but we're getting close. And a lot of the policy and practices that we've advocated for successfully, including getting gender inclusive restrooms in almost every building on campus, for example, have been a result of student activism. So that's my final question for you, my final little quiz. Which of these groups do you think are the most likely, according to our research, to take action to improve Lehigh's campus? Are they Greek-affiliated students, student athletes, presidents of student organizations, or LGBTQ+ students? So I'll just give it another 10 seconds or so. Looks like we're a little bit split. We've got some people thinking it's Greek-affiliated students, some people thinking it's LGBTQ. So even though all of these groups, so Greek-affiliated students, student athletes, and presidents of student organizations, they all do a lot to make our campus better. According to our research, LGBTQ+ students are actually the most likely of all of our different groups on campus to take action to improve their campus and improve their community. So we have an amazing group of LGBTQ+ students here at Lehigh, some involved in the Pride Center, some involved in other things. And so we are always really excited to get to speak with first years regardless of their identity, to get to share some of the different opportunities. And then one in particular that we'll talk a little bit more about today that we've been working in partnership with Chris and her team on is our All Gender Housing Initiative. So I'll turn it over to Chris to go over some of our housing options.
Thank you so much. So my name is Christina Diaversa, and some of you might have already seen or heard me in various other seminars that we've been doing, but I'm joining you today to talk in particular about housing services, and the opportunities that we can offer to students on our campus. So our mission statement very quickly is just to, we're committed to Lehigh students to give them a quality living environment that fosters academic success, personal growth, and community development. And there's a bunch of different ways that we do that. But most importantly for us, it's about offering students a safe and welcoming environment. And so that's one of the things that we look to do through partnerships with various offices on campus. So most of you by now have heard a lot about the housing. You've probably even done your housing contract by now, but we have a ton of different housing options for students on our campus. We have singles, we have doubles, we have triples. We offer traditional suite and apartment style. We offer single gender, co-ed, and all gender floors. We have 8 different themes, and we have housing accommodations that are available. And all of these factors go into how we do every student's housing. So I'm just curious, very quickly, I want to jump on a poll here and get an idea with where you're at with your current housing understanding. You have a lot of questions, you don't really know too much, you think you're pretty good, but you have a few questions, or you're all over it, like you're done, you're good. Beautiful. Okay, great. Because that'll help me as I'm going through, go into a little bit less detail for those of you, because for the most part, you feel pretty confident. So great, thank you so much. And then we talked a little bit, we talk about themes. I say we have 8 themes. I'm curious if you have an understanding of what themes are, or if you're not interested, you're good. Yes, you kind of know about themes, but you have some questions, or you have no clue and want to know more. Perfect, great. So we can address those questions then in the Q&A section for the couple of you that have questions, when we won't go into too many theme specific. And then finally, just my last question to give me an understanding is, do you feel like you have a good understanding of the single gender, co-ed gender, and all gender floors, or are you looking for a little more detail on those? Beautiful. Okay, well, thank you. So what I'll do then is talk to you guys more general on the entire picture and how we make the options available to you through the contract and what they could look like in the process to give you a better understanding of what your housing could look like as a student. And if you have any questions, feel free to jump in the Q&A section, and we will make sure that we get them at the end. Okay, so we talked about singles and doubles and triples and all the different types of gender preferences and themes. And just to show you an example, right here is the possibilities of assignments for one student on our campus. This example that I pulled would be for somebody that is a transgender student and the opportunities that they would be given during the housing process. So you can see that it is across the board. We try to offer the singles and the doubles and even sometimes triples, common bathrooms or private bathrooms, all types of gender specific housing. So really our goal is to meet the students with their housing wants and to be able to allow them to live in the housing of their choice. So like I said, this is an example of one particular student and the options that we would be able to offer this student. And as you become a second, a third, or a fourth year student, these options expand even more because you can add in the apartments and the suites that we have for upperclassmen, which are all have the opportunity to be all gender or co-ed. So lots of possibilities. Just reminding everybody really quickly that our contract deadline is June 5th. So if you haven't done the contract, we want to make sure that you get all of the information in by June 5th, because that's how we will know what your preferences are to be able to figure out your possible assignments from there. So on June 5th, what happens is the process closes, and I will open up this wonderful report that has 1,500 students, singles versus doubles versus triples, and roommate matches and themes and gender preferences, and my face looks like the one on the left, and then usually the one in the middle. And after that, then we start to process all of the different contracts and looking at each student's overall picture. And so then I look more like the one on the right, where I'm like, all right, let's do this, let's get to work. And basically between June 5th and June 26th this year, we are drilling down into the different housing possibilities and opportunities that we can offer to students. So essentially what happens is once we close that contract on the 5th, everybody gets a number. And your number kind of determines the order of when you will get your housing within our system. And we will review every single person, and we look at themes versus no themes. If they preferenced a single, or they have a roommate, or they don't have a roommate but didn't preference a single. We will look at gender housing preferences. Do they want a single gender, co-ed, or all gender? And we also will look at their identified gender as listed on the contract in order to do the housing placement. So one of the things that is the biggest challenge is we have to go through those steps and look for things that we call mismatches. So if I have a roommate and my roommate and I don't have matching themes, we will communicate to students and let them know what that means. Singles typically in our system will trump a roommate match. So sometimes students will say, yes, I prefer a single, and then get on to our roommate matching system and find a roommate and want to live with that person and match with them. So we will send emails to students that have single preference and roommate matches, making sure they understand that singles will typically trump roommate matches. And so if that's not what they intended, they should go back in their contract and fix it. We will look for students that have roommates that have maybe mismatched gender housing preferences. And we'll also go through and look for students by their identified genders, and if they have a roommate pairing that's mismatched, which doesn't work with the gender housing preference. So I'll show you a little bit more about those in just a couple minutes to kind of give you a real-time feel for what that might look like. After that, we start looking at themes and the numbers in themes and how many people want singles within themes and all that good stuff. And we will make theme placements. So the idea behind themes is put as many people in the theme that want it as you can. Why wouldn't you? So we have this wonderful flexibility to be able to move our themes around. So if we have 28 people that want Arts Alive and none of them want a single, they all want roommates and they all want co-ed, we will try to put them in a building that is all doubles with co-ed floors, and voila, everybody's happy. But sometimes it also means there might be one person that varies a little bit from the rest of the group. And so we'll start to look at theme placements. Once we make our theme placements, if anybody within that theme has to vary a little bit. So let's say we are going to put the first gen population into a co-ed floor, and it's going to be all double rooms. If somebody preferences a single and that theme, we will often reach out to that person and say, we noticed that you have this theme and this gender preference and you want a single. Wanted to let you know the theme's going to be put into a building that has all doubles. What's your preference? So we'll make those adjustments with students as well in that time frame. And then we also will look at overflow for themes. So if we would have a theme where no matter what we do, we can't put them into a building that is going to fit everybody, based on the numbers, we will kind of count it out and reach out to students that are going to maybe not get their theme preference and see if they have a second theme preference, and go from there. So that's kind of the overall process. It's a lot more detailed than that, but so I just wanted to show you 3 quick examples. So here we have Sally and Charlotte. So Sally got number 31 and Charlotte got number 1231. And you can kind of see their theme, their gender preferences. Neither of them picked a single. They both roommate matched and they both identified as females. So this is what we call perfect match. I don't need to contact Charlotte or Sally. They're good. The system will automatically put them together, and we should be good to go. Easy. That's my easy one. Second example, I've got Jesse and John. So you can see that this is my uh-ohs. Like this is the biggie. They pretty much don't match on anything. Their themes don't match. Their gender preferences don't match. One preference is single and matched with a roommate. The other one didn't and matched with the roommate. And their gender identities are different. And so basically in this situation, we would send an email trying to clarify all the differences. So absolutely a student that identifies differently in regards to gender than another student can live together. But what flags this is that Jesse's asking for a single gender floor. So that kind of makes it an interesting combo. So everything with this would need to be kind of worked out with the 2 students. And sometimes what happens is the students will come together and agree on the themes or make a change to their preferences. We never, we do trump singles, trump roommates, but we never split up roommate matches unless we run out of doubles. So in the case where we have no more double rooms and all we have left is singles, which is the very last thing that we would do, those last couple of people might get split up from their roommates. And in that case, we would try to put them on the same floor or in the same building, but that happens very minimally. Oftentimes it's more that what would happen in this situation is because John has the better number, he's gonna pull Jesse into the outdoor adventure theme and into all gender housing. And so those are the communications that we'll send out to get the students to align themselves. So, and then finally, just very quickly, this is the 3rd example where we've got Greg and Scott. Greg's got the better number and they're matching on almost everything. The only thing they don't match on is the gender preference. Again, we would reach out and we would say, one of you chose single gender, one of you chose co-ed. Best case would be for you guys to talk about it and somebody change their responses. But if they didn't do that, then in this case, Greg would probably pull Scott from co-ed preference into single gender preference based on the better selection number. So that kind of gives you an overall idea of how we handle all of this information. What I will say is the best thing that you can do is educate yourself, provide intentional answers on our housing contract, communicate with your roommates, and communicate with us. So read all the information ahead of time, make sure you understand what all the different terms are that we're asking you to define on the contract. Be honest and thoughtful in the answers to your housing contract. That'll work for you. Talk with your roommate about it. You know, sometimes what we find is like students don't even talk about, look, I chose this theme. What did you choose? So when we send out those emails between like June 5th and June 23rd, they're surprised that they didn't perfectly match with their roommate because on the questionnaire they did, which is great. But they don't often talk about maybe having different gender preferences between co-ed, all gender, and single gender. And then lastly, communicate with us with what your needs and wants are on top of all of that. And we have an opportunity at the end for you guys to complete a very short survey. And one of the opportunities in that survey is to communicate to us in one of 4 different ways. Anything that you feel is important for us to know in order to complete your housing that you weren't able to maybe convey on the housing contract simply by answering the questions.
And I'll just say, from my perspective as a campus partner with Chris and the rest of Housing Services, they truly do want to make every effort to accommodate your needs. And so please do take her up on that offer to reach out. Before we get to the FAQs, we did have a couple of questions come in, and I know you touched on the way that themed housing placements work, Chris, but someone had a question about the STEM community in particular. Have heard that the STEM community will be split into maybe 3 different houses, not just in Taylor. So can you shed some light on how you know that that might work?
And I'll preference my answer by saying I am not 100% sure on this, that I won't have a configuration completed for first years until probably mid to late June, as we hear the announcement from Lehigh's president about the fall. But right now, if nothing were to change, and we would proceed with the fall as expected, we will have first year students in Taylor in STEM community, sharing space in Taylor with upper class STEM community members. So that is one of 2 joint buildings where we have first years and upper class living together. So all in all, there's about 150 students in that building that will be first years and upper class. And then there's an upper class component of STEM that will open in the new residential building, Singleton, for the fall. What is still up in the air and won't be decided until June, in early June, and then finalized in the configuration, is whether or not any overflow of first year numbers would be considered into a 3rd building. And that's usually a decision that's made based on the overall volume of applicants and the range of students and placements, and whether the advisors feel that they can run an adequate theme program, in more than 1 building or 2 buildings. So that's still yet to be finalized, but we will know that before housing assignments are made. And if for any reason we are not able to accommodate students into a theme that they preference because of space, then we reach out to those students to see if they have a second preference.
Thanks, Chris. And we did see we got some more questions. Maybe we'll go ahead and answer a couple of the FAQs and kind of go back and forth between those and some of the other questions. So as we were preparing for this webinar, we were thinking about what are the questions that each of us have gotten over the years? What are the things that tend to come up pretty often? And one that we've been referring to is all gender housing. Who is that actually for? So one thing that I'll share, at least from my perspective, and then I'll let Chris join in, is that all gender housing benefits so many students of many different identities. So ultimately, we created all gender housing because we want students to have an option to live with the people they want to live with and the environment they want to live in. Now, from my perspective as well, all gender housing does benefit some students who identify as trans. Not every trans student certainly wants to live in all gender housing, and that's not a requirement. Trans students, as Chris mentioned, can live in any of the different housing configurations. But for some students, having that flexibility to live with someone who is of any gender is really meaningful, and to live on that hall that isn't constrained by just one gender. So that's what I have from my perspective. But Chris, do you have anything else on that one that you would add?
Yeah, I mean, my simple answer to parents or students when they ask me about all gender housing is that it's an opportunity for anybody to live with anyone else without the constraints that are sometimes put on us by gender. So that makes it a really nice opportunity. I will say that this group is entering its 3rd year in the first year area and the 4th year in the upper class area. And we've heard nothing but positives from the students, the staff that are involved in it, and it's just a really great opportunity for students.
Thanks, Chris. And kind of building on that, we do get a lot of questions about what are the housing options for trans and non-binary students. And again, we don't have a one-size-fits-all kind of policy here at Lehigh, like some schools do, because everyone's needs are different. So some trans and non-binary students want to be in an all-gender space. Some would rather be in a co-ed space with a roommate of their gender identity, which is perfectly fine, right? So even if your legal gender, for example, it's female, but your gender identity is as a man, you could live with a roommate who's also a man or on a men's floor. And some people might prefer something else. And we've had students certainly over the years who have taken advantage of a number of those different options. So I think the most important thing is to be in communication with housing services, to let them know what your needs are early so that they can maximize your opportunity to get into what you need. Chris, is there more you would say on that?
I would just add that what I love about our housing contract is that we do ask for students' identified gender, and that it is an open question, so you can define that however it is for you, and the opportunity to say to us, I need this, or I'm really thinking this will benefit me the most, is a nice opportunity to kind of add that in. I've worked with students that have completed the housing contract and felt that they were able to get all of the information that they wanted us to know in that contract, and they've secured their housing. I've worked with students, in the past where we talk often to make sure that what we're providing for that student will work for that student. So that it's a variety. And what I would just say to students is, if you're not sure that we will be able to get you housing through the process without adding information, please feel free to add information, because we would always prefer to have students be happy with their housing assignments than for them maybe not to speak up for themselves on what they feel they need, and then get here and not have the best experience.
And we did have a question come in, Chris, about private bathrooms, which I know are not necessarily common in our housing, right? It's much more common for a student to have some sort of a shared bathroom situation. Can you share a little bit more about what qualifies a student to have one, or how those assignments are divvied up?
Absolutely. So we are lucky in the sense that we do have suites with private bathrooms in first year areas. So maybe it is a 1-person or 2-person or 3-person space with a private bathroom versus the common floor bathroom that can be shared with up to 27, 28 people. We also are lucky, we have some apartment styles where we have maybe a 1-person or 2-person apartment, which would have a private bathroom and a private kitchen. So we're lucky in the sense that we do have some of those available in first year areas. We have them available in 3 of our 8 buildings where the private bathroom and or the private bathroom kitchen combo can be met. So unfortunately, we don't have them in every single building on every single type of gender floor, but we do have them throughout, which is nice, that students are able to live in a first year space. They're able to have a roommate if they want to. And how we designate those spaces for assignment is a larger group effort. So if you were a student that was looking for one of those spaces, whether it was for privacy or for religious purposes, because you don't eat anything in the dining hall, we have students that might have a medical accommodation for having a kitchen or a private bathroom. So we work with all of those students as a group to place them as best as we can, close to a theme or close to a gender preference or in the gender preference that they want. So if you are a student that feels that you would benefit the most from having that private bathroom or private bathroom kitchen, reach out through the survey at the end, and we can kind of chat more about that and go from there.
Thanks, Chris. So we also get questions every year about how someone can find an LGBTQ friendly roommate. So, one thing that we want to make clear from the outset is that it is an expectation of anyone who comes and joins the Lehigh community that they are respectful, and supportive, at least in terms of not showing any discriminatory or harassing behavior of anyone, regardless of identity. Many people come to Lehigh from a variety of different identities and backgrounds and experiences. And it's an expectation that you might be put out of your comfort zone a little bit when you're living with someone who might be different from you. And it should still be a respectful and safe environment for everyone involved. So that being said, I know that many students might want the assurance that they are living with someone who is going to be LGBTQ plus or an ally or actively supportive, and that's important to us as well. So Chris, do you want to share a little bit about what some opportunities are that students might be able to connect with someone who's LGBTQ friendly?
So we essentially have two opportunities where you can share to your comfort level to help you find a roommate that's LGBTQ plus friendly. We have the My College Roommate, which is the roommate matching program that we use, and most of you by now, if you've done your contract, have already gotten the invitation to that. In that profile, you have the opportunity through the biography to share whatever you're comfortable with. So that is one way that you can connect with students. The other way is that we are, after this session, going to be creating a network within that community. I'm sorry, within MCR, which is My College Roommate. And basically, it's going to be a private community, which is searchable. So one of the things that the survey at the end will ask you is, would you like to become a part of our networking community? And if you say yes, it'll ask you for your email. And basically then we will use your email to tag you in MCR as a part of our community. No one else can see that you're a part of the group or the community. But from there, basically, you could search with the name of the community, which we'll only share with you guys. And you'll be able to see other members and friend them, and then have private conversations through messaging or more public conversations on the platform itself if you're both comfortable with it. So we're hoping that we'll probably get that all finalized and set up early next week for those of you that choose to be a part of that special group within MCR.
And we'll also be sharing this webinar and that link with other students who weren't able to join us today so that they can join that community as well. So we've had a couple other questions come in. I know one student, I know a few folks were joining us from outside the US. One student is not sure if they can arrive on campus in time due to the current situation with COVID. What will happen if they already submitted the housing contract but can't arrive on campus?
That's a great question. So I have been working with Samba and Caroline in the Office of International Affairs. We are asking everybody to do the contract. That way, if Lehigh is here in the fall and you are able to travel to campus, you've done what you need to do and you've secured that. But I know that after the announcement goes out in June, there's going to be some follow-up for students that might have travel restrictions depending on what the announcement is, and some other opportunities. So essentially what happens is, if you don't physically come to our campus to take classes, you're not liable or bound by our contract. So basically we would just defer that contract for the spring in the hopes that you'll be able to join us then, or even next fall depending. But you wouldn't owe us any money for housing or dining if you aren't able to get
Thanks, Chris. And again, feel free to ask more questions in the Q&A or in the chat. We have another question from someone who is interested in having privacy in terms of a suite or a private bathroom and would prefer that over a themed community. Is there a way you'd suggest they indicate that in the housing contract?
Yeah, so essentially what you would want to do is use the survey at the end to send me that message and just say you would really prefer the private bathroom. That message goes into play when I look at your overall contract. So I would see that you maybe chose STEM community and co-ed floor and a single room, and you would like a private bathroom. And I look at that picture and I say, okay, well, we can't do all of those. And so then you would get an email from me that would be like, okay, well, based on this, we can't do all of that, but here's what we could do. And then you would get a couple different scenarios, like maybe something like we have the private bathroom in STEM, but it's not on a co-ed floor, it's on a single gendered floor, things like that. So that's all stuff that happens between June 5th and June 26th, where we try to get clarification. So then we're able to house people accordingly.
Thanks.
Anyone else have any other questions? Okay. Well, thank you all so much for joining us. I'm free at any time, and I should have stopped sharing my screen because they took away our. If I can get it back up here real quick. So the survey that we were talking about, we made a quick link. So if you just type go.lehigh.edu/P-network, it'll take you to a survey, and you can use it to sign up for a networking group. You can use it to meet other people and network or find a roommate if you want. Plus, tell us a little bit about how we did today, things that you liked, things that you didn't like for the future, so we can make improvements. And continue to send emails and questions for housing services in-house at lehigh.edu, and for the Pride Center at Lehigh.
All right. Thank you all for joining us, and congratulations again. We look forward to hopefully seeing you in the fall.
Thank you, everybody. Have a great day.